City of Stevens Point Finance Committee meeting, recorded April 8, 2024.
All right, I'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order at 6:25 p.m. Could we please have roll taken?
Sure. So Broderick's excused. Christensen?
Here.
Morrow?
Here.
Shore?
Here.
And Shuda?
Here.
4 present.
All right, thank you. We have an interesting agenda tonight. First item on our agenda for number 2, discussion and possible action on the approval of modifications to the relocation assistance program for former Edgewater Manor residents.
Yes, so as many of you may remember, we have a relocation assistance program for the former residents of the Edgewater Manor that helps to subsidize their rent, and that's funded with the remaining monies from the Edgewater Manor Fund when that was in operation. And typically we make an annual adjustment to it because over time, so it's based on income, and over time incomes go up, and also rents do go up over time. So in the attached memo, I have what the current program is, and then the proposal. Basically, it would be updating those income ranges slightly to try to keep everyone in their same bracket that they're in currently, and then also adding a little bit to that monthly amount to help with some of the rental increases that we're seeing in the marketplace.
Thanks for the word. I'll move approval of the changes.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Morrow. Questions, comments from the committee?
How many total people do we have on this program?
We have, I want to say it's about, well, we've got about 7 at the Berkshire, and then we've got some with Candlewood. Carrie, do you remember how many we have with Candlewood? 2. Okay, so I'd say we've got about 9. Yep.
And the fund's doing all right?
Yes, yep, the fund is doing well, so it, especially as people have transitioned out of the program, that has definitely helped with the fund and its long-term trajectory. So we should be good to continue to have this program for another 20 years.
Okay.
So, which is, I mean, we want to be there for, you know, people can live a long time nowadays, so we want to, you know, obviously make sure that this fund is solvent for the long haul.
I mean,
so
it was originally saved up associated with the expected costs that the building needed.
yes, correct. Yep.
Okay. Any other questions, committee? Any from the public? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. All those in favor of approving that amount, that increase in the amount for our assistance program for our Edgewater relocation would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed would be no. That passes unanimously. Our next item on the agenda, we have the authorization for the City Forestry Department to apply for an urban forestry grant. Director Kramer.
City Forester Todd Ernster did provide kind of a memo that breaks this out, but to synopsis for those that maybe didn't read it in detail, the Federal Government Inflation Reduction Act allows us to apply for a grant that's actually $0 match. So we're seeking to apply for up to $105,000. There's really 3 segments of this grant. One of them would reduce a little bit of the burden if we're awarded on some of the construction costs for tree planting related to Walker and Washington Avenue. So one that's coming up most likely this year, and then one for next year. We have a 3-year grant window to spend the funds if we do get awarded it. The second piece of this is we'll be looking as the Forestry Department to work with the Stevens Point Housing Authority to replace some ash trees that have emerald ash borer. And then additionally, kind of a collaboration between the Old Main Association as well as the 2 other partners, Central Rivers Farm Shed, to plant some fruit trees and private property for property owners that would allow it. So essentially this doesn't cost us anything, and we're trying to seek to get funding if we can from a limited pool that's available basically for the whole state of Wisconsin.
Okay. Thank you, Director Kramer. Committee, what's your wishes?
I'll move approval.
Approval was moved for by Alder Shore, second by Alder Shuda. Questions, comments from the committee? Any from the public? Hearing none, all in favor?
Oh, it looks like we've got Alder Lang.
Alder Lang.
I would just like to say this is exactly what I believe the people of Stevens Point find fantastic and just wonderful about our city. Like, we have fantastic staff to go after this kind of stuff. This is something that I hope to see a little bit more of, because like this is what I was hoping to see when I got elected, and I'm so excited to see our forestry department going after this grant money, getting this money back into our community. And I've just got to say thank you from the people, because this is things that I know all around our community people want to see more of. So thank you to Director Kramer and to our forester, Ernster.
Okay, thank you, Alder Lang. We will proceed with our vote. Those in favor of approving the authorization for the City Forestry Department to apply for their urban forestry grant would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed would be no. And that passes unanimously. Item number 4 on our agenda, approval of a request to reallocate capital front project funds and to add an additional $25,000 in capital project funding in order to complete the roofing projects for Fire Station 2 and the Public Works Garage. We did get to hear a little bit of that at our previous committee meeting. Director Badoun, if you'd like to expound a little bit longer.
I'm not sure I have much otherwise to truly expound on it, other than I would say, as I put in memos, that the two we're looking at, Fire Station number 2 would be our highest priority of what we otherwise have. It's definitely the building that probably needs to get the most benefit out of the attention we're trying to give it to it. The Public Works Garage, which is otherwise a little bit aged, sometimes I even question myself, how much do you really put into it? So in those cases, we're probably looking at some other roofing, which I otherwise have stated in here. I think we can recoup most of it, talking to Garland, but what it is by just changing some of the materials that we are incorporating into the Public Works facility roof. So ultimately, the hope at least would be that we would come out essentially a wash, and I think we're pretty close to that. Just the material costs, essentially, similar installation in most cases, that Garland came up with is about $15,000. And that didn't include a minor potential change at the fire station. That's just the Public Works Garage. The change at the fire station would be, which I would think would really just be kind of a temporary thing if we wanted to cover it in this year. They do have a snow stop incorporated in that. The nice thing about this roofing system that we're getting is it's essentially modular. It's clamps. There's no fasteners through there. The fasteners are actually underneath the roof, and everything's put on top of it. So this clamping system allows for the snow stop to go on. I was, otherwise given a brief description of how it goes on, and even I could do it. I think so. If that just shows you how absolutely easy this is, so it's something we could otherwise find and purchase after the fact. And I mean, if I could do it, that means we have staff in Public Works and all that could definitely do even a much better job and faster to do that. So I think we're in a really good situation there as far as working with them to cover the cost. So. Although I do want the money in case we come up with anything unexpected, that would be our contingency, but that's what I'm hoping that ultimately becomes, is just the contingency dollars to make sure if we do come in anything. I know there were a few soft spots in the sheathing noticed on the roof. It's hard until we really get into it that we know the true extent of what it is, but I think we've got most of it covered. So any questions, I can definitely answer.
I would just say roofs are one of those things that you want to make sure to take care of, because it will cost you some now, but if you don't take care of them, it's going to cost you a lot more later. So I'm glad we're staying on top of that.
On top of it.
On top of the roof. There you go.
That was good.
Chief Moody.
And I would just like to echo and agree with what you actually just said. When we looked at this project and we said this is one of the priorities within the city, we're realistic, and I'm realistic as the fire chief. Our fire stations have to last 75 years. From the time of being built, they've got to last roughly about 75 years before we're looking at putting up a new building. That station was built in 1983. We're 41 years into it, and this roof, we looked at getting a 30 to 35-year steel roof put on it, potentially hoping to last the lifetime of this station now. So we've got 34 years to go at that firehouse, and I'm looking for this roof to last the entirety.
Just for the record, I'm not planning on being around to approve the next one.
You sure?
I'm not sure of anything, so All right. That's our information. What's the committee's wishes?
Gonna let them have a turn.
So moved.
Moved by Alder Morrow, second by Alder Schuda. Any other questions or comments from the committee?
Nope.
Any from the public? Hearing none, a vote would be in order. All those in favor of approving of those roofing projects with the additional $25,000 in funding, primarily to be used for contingency if needed.
Do we have to do a roll call because there's money?
Not at the committee level, so it'll be at council.
Okay.
It'll probably be on the consent agenda, and then it'll be roll called on the consent agenda.
Okay.
Right. Good question, though. All in favor of approval would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed would be no. And that's approved unanimously. We're flying right through. Scroll back up. And that takes us to number 5, the approval of a state municipal agreement from the state of Wisconsin DOT to participate with WisDOT to repave Highway 66 between West Gates Drive and West Carner Street. Director Badoon.
This may not be quite as good as the Parks grant, but it comes pretty close, I think, for what it otherwise is. So earlier this year, the DOT reached out to me, talk about this potential future project. It's actually something that's not even in their current plan yet, but they're trying to allocate funds and move it forward. So originally, kind of outside the plan, like 19, geez, my gosh, I'm showing my age, 2031. They're trying to move it forward, so actually the construction will probably occur hopefully no later than 29. The only others get started on it here, but they're using federal dollars to do a repave of Highway 66. And because it's a connecting highway, our portion of it within the city, and we do get state aids to take care of that, that they can't simply just come through to wherever they stop at the municipal boundary, but it doesn't prevent us from participating with it, and that's where the SMA comes in play. And what they're otherwise looking for with the dollars that they have is we pay 25% of the design cost, which is just shy of $30,000, and the remainder of it, construction, unless we wanted to add something of our own, is covered under their grant at 100%. So actually a pretty good deal. The estimated total cost about nearly $1.4 million. So I thought a $28,000, even I was smart enough to bring this one forward.
Motion to approve. Any questions for Director Badoon?
No. Motion to approve.
Motion approved by Alder Morrow, second by Alder Schuda. Any other questions? If not, we will move ahead with our vote. All in favor of approving that WisDOT grant to participate in that project would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed would be no. That gets us.
Business 51.
Yep.
Number 6.
Number 6, approval of agreements with AECom for the final design. We've now completed our 30% design, and we're ready to start moving to the final design. Director Badoon.
So there are 2 separate agreements in front of you, just so everyone's aware of that. The first is for that north segment, so that would be 4th Avenue to the existing roundabout. That one is the $787,890.56. The other one is the south segment, is just that portion of it related to the SDP Urban. So that would be south city limits to approximately Michigan in the amount of $670,900.68. One might otherwise ask the question, because the difference in lengths of that, why is the north side, which is longer, really not that much more than the south side, and the difference is the free money we're getting from the federal government. With the north side being locally funded, we just need to meet, basic, DOT design requirements, but other than that, it's just what satisfies us at the local level. It's local bidding and all. On the south end, we have a lot of work to do. And there's all the environmental documentations to do it, all the hazmat stuff, all the review from the DOT and such along the way. So there's considerable more work that AECom needs to complete within that design study reports and all that need to be completed as milestones before we get to the bidding process. So, you know, way to say it is, you know, that's the cost of free money.
Free money isn't totally free, yeah. Alder Shore.
Thank you. So Michigan to Patch is part of the
Part of the south, yes. The south segment is South Siemens to Patch Street. This would just be South Siemens to Michigan.
Okay, so this is designed for the entire south.
This is just a design for that south end of it.
Yep, thank
So,
you.
yes.
Okay. Any other questions? What are the committee's wishes?
Motion to approve, please.
Motion approved by Alder Morrow,
Second.
second by Alder Shore. Any other comments, last-minute comments? Otherwise, all in favor of approving the agreements with the AECom for the final design of Business 51 would signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. That passes unanimously. Gets us to number 7, approval of funding for the construction of a proposed subdivision at 5498 Gala Road. Director Knosky.
Okay, so a few things. There's been a lot of discussion over, you know, the proposed subdivision, which has been dubbed Forest Creek, and kind of where we're at in the process there. So just a quick recap. City staff has been working on this project, I believe, since about August of last year. We've been working with Greimer & Associates, which is a local engineering firm, to put together some conceptual designs, start the work concurrently with doing some of the bidding, hoping that, you know, we could get this through and under construction in 2024 so that we could start addressing some of the needs for additional housing within our community. We did in February have a public information meeting as it relates to the road project itself at the town of Hull. Had about 50 residents show up and had some concerns. At that time, the proposed subdivision was 85 units, so 85 mix of single and two family at that point. From that public information meeting, we did pare the plan back a little bit to about 72 lots and went to the preliminary plat process that was last week. Had a number of town hall residents show up, about 120 or so. Sorry, fire chief, we were definitely over capacity. And so at the direction of the city plan commission, they really wanted us to look at three main things within the preliminary plat. There was some concerns over the Lost Creek and drainage ditch area along the north side of that property, consider reducing the overall density of the development, and then look at ways to increase green space around the development. So last week, city staff really went back to the drawing board, and we were able to essentially reduce the density from 72 total parcels to 59, of which 43 would be single family and the remaining 16 would be zero lot line. And then we're working with Nick and Diane Summers, attorney, to review the easement that exists and look at other bicycle and pedestrian path and those types of facilities along the north lot line. To help address some of the concerns with the drainage ditch and then provide some of that additional public infrastructure, especially as the city continues to grow to the east and to the northeast. It makes a lot of sense for us to look at ways that we can expand pedestrian path opportunities, especially with the Plover River crossing down Maple Bluff and Benz Lane, crossing over into Hoffmeister Drive. This is a really unique opportunity for us to look at additional ways to connect east of Berlowski. There was an ask to look at the total financial impact for this specific subdivision. And really, even though we've reduced the number of lots, the cost to construct the subdivision hasn't significantly decreased. In fact, it stayed relatively stagnant. I did work with Director Badoon's office and the city engineer, Greg Shannon, to look at what is that additional cost, or what's the reduction in cost, and it's really rather insignificant, quite frankly. And so this is a really prime example of why we try to have density when we do subdivision development, that infrastructure cost is here, and we've reduced our density 3 times now, and that's something that we have to be cognizant of when we do these types of projects. As the mayor had explained a little earlier, there's really 2 phases of this development. The first phase will be the deep sewer and water connecting from Wildwood on Walter Street, headed east to Joe Street, and then up to Gala Road. Within that first phase, we'll also go back between Evelyn Court and Joe Street and put in the deep sewer and water there and connect the Evelyn Court future planned roadway within the planned right-of-way sewer and water extensions as well. And then essentially opening up Gala Road, putting in the sewer water there, connecting those streets as part of phase 2 for the proposed subdivision. So kind of regardless of how the subdivision will lay out and how it will function, it is important for the future outward growth of the community that we have deep sewer and deep water within the Gala Road, Regent Street area, because we mentioned earlier that the cost for us to put those utilities in Brolowski is pretty much cost prohibitive. In this case, really, we have one stretch of Joe Street where we have to crack that open, put those utilities in, and the rest of it is all just putting it in. There's no infrastructure that would need to be put back on top of it. So really, I was asked to provide an estimate for what the cost would be per lot in the subdivision. And realistically, if the subdivision were to bear the entire cost of the development, it's right around $48,000 a lot, which is a pretty high number. I don't believe that it's the sole responsibility of this subdivision to bear that entire cost. That area between Regent Street and Gala Road, west of Brolowski, is a future planned subdivision that the city owns part of that lot. We have an agreement with the Barkowiak family that will buy the remaining 5 acres from them in the next few years, and then that will be another subdivision south of this. So it's part of the reason why, a little cart before horse in this instance, where we plan the further development first with the nearer development after, or as a second phase, because of just that agreement that legal agreement that we had with the Barkowiak family. So if the Forest Creek subdivision were only to cover its costs for just phase 2, it significantly reduces the price per lot to about $19,000, and that includes sewer, water, and the road utility as well. I also put together a quick number where the subdivision would cost, would take on about a third of the cost for the whole project. And that's kind of the hybrid model that I mentioned in the memo. That ends up being right around the $28,000 mark per parcel. I don't think that these costs are super out of line with what we've seen in other areas, especially in the Village of Plover, where you have very similar rural cross sections with sewer and water in those roadways. And then on the final page, I marked it as Exhibit A, is some conceptual costs for what we could sell the lots for. We're seeing about $2.75 a square foot in comparable neighborhoods for lots. So for single family, you see anything from, on the low end, the $25,000 mark, higher end about $90,000, just based on those price per square foot. These are lower than what the realtor had estimated for us, but I know we also want to be a little bit cognizant that we don't want to shoot for the stars. In this instance, we want to be conservative with our sale estimates. So the total cost without the contingency was $2,831,856. That total number includes both phases, if you will, and total revenue from just the Forest Creek subdivision lot is essentially $2.1 million. So there is a gap there, but I believe that gap can be pretty well managed with a future planned subdivision to the south, and that the city will be made whole in terms of the upfront costs, and then anything above and beyond that, like we did for the Whitetail subdivision, would likely be transferred into the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund itself is managed through the Redevelopment Authority, and that fund funds like our Neighbor Helping Neighbor grant, and a number of different programs that are really designed for our older housing stock here in the city of Stevens Point. So I know it's a lot of information, a lot of numbers that were thrown around. This is just for the upfront costs. I know there was some question, well, what is the long-term financial obligation based on this? And it's really hard to pinpoint that number. We had done an estimate based on a previous subdivision plan, and it was just kind of all over the place. I don't know if anyone knows what the cost per lineal foot is to maintain a roadway, but we had an estimate at one point, and that's 3 or 4 years ago. So trying to figure out, okay, then what's the assessed value of these properties? There's a number of formulas that just really are shooting in the dark at that point to figure out whether or not this pays for itself long term. I do believe with the density that's proposed and some of the projected property tax income in perpetuity as those sites become developed, I don't have a concern about this subdivision's ability to support its future infrastructure needs as well. So,
Thank you, Director. Any questions? Alder Shore.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, those, you anticipated probably, some of the discussion of the long-term obligations. Any of us who pays any attention to strong towns, one of the things that gets beaten into your head, I think particularly from Chuck Marone's perspective, is that you need density for financial sustainability. So hearing about how this has become less dense is from low 80s to low 50s?
high 50s, 59 totally lots.
High 50s. It's a little concerning because it takes the greater, this is, if anybody wondered why I pressed this question with respect to Park Ridge, this is about the relationship between how much property value there is fronting, so that when everything needs to be replaced in 40 years, there's enough revenue. You're comfortable, I guess.
I would have liked to see more density, but the direction that we've received from Plan Commission was to reduce density. I would not, if we went to Plan Commission, they said get it even lower, I don't think it makes financial sense for us to go below 59 lots. I think this is kind of our break point at this point.
Let me, if I may, press for the finer point, which is this. There are fewer units because of the other things that needed to be done on the space, or did they get bigger?
The total number of units, the total lots got bigger. Yeah, in general, the concept plan that staff has put together, which is not included in here because it was literally a black Sharpie, where we're starting to figure out how this thing could look given the existing road infrastructure and the existing road layout. The lots simply got bigger, and that's where you lost a number of your 0 lot lines and your single family.
So they got bigger not for the sake of getting bigger, but for how they fit. Is that what you're saying?
Well, they got bigger for the sake of a desire for lower density from the Plan Commission.
Well, we don't have I'll come back in discussion. We don't have a motion.
Will there be discussions at the city council level as far as that discussion on density?
No, so there'll be no preliminary plat before you this month. It was returned back to city staff. The direction from Plan was lower the density, address some of the concerns with green space, and of course the drainage ditch, as I'd mentioned earlier. From that, we will take that preliminary plat hopefully back to Plan Commission in June for their review. We are shopping it around, if you will. We've been talking to some of our friends at the town hall. We've been talking to the Summers attorney, trying to find this balance of responsible development and working with your neighboring municipality.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. So as far as the plat that you're working on and that 59 number, that's still preliminary at this point?
Correct. But I think that, I know the Director Benuna mentioned this, the physical road design has not changed.
Right.
And I don't intend for that to change, other than we shifted the North Road south 25 feet. I don't foresee that physical design changing, because it gets back to some of the basics of reestablishing the grid that we really want to see as urban planners. I know extending Joe Street all the way up to the creek makes a lot of sense to us. So it's not like we're going to be putting in 3 or 4 cul-de-sacs or anything anytime soon. So that's why you don't see a significant concern from public works staff or planning staff, because the road infrastructure as planned is probably going to remain as is as part of the planning process.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? Okay. Any from the any comments from the public?
Do we have a motion on the floor?
I don't think we have a motion yet.
We don't have a motion.
Okay. What's the committee's wishes?
Not me.
Okay, I'll make a motion to approve.
Alder Murrow makes the motion to approve. Is there a second? Second by Alder Schuda. Oh, you just nodded.
For our elder.
So you're not seconding?
No one's gonna,
Is there a second? I will second the motion. So, brings us to a vote.
Yeah, I mean, a little discussion, a little further discussion. I mean,
Sure.
I'm concerned to make adjustments to the plan, the layout, the green space, what makes sense for the infrastructure. Absolutely, that's what the public review and discussion is for.
But
I have a discomfort with growing the size of the lots. Number one, because of concern about our long-term infrastructure liability. Number two, because it cuts against, adding as much housing supply as we can to alleviate some of the pressure on the housing market. So those are concerns.
Right, but so noted, but at this point, the lot sizes and plats, those are all preliminary. What this is approving is basically just the roads and the infrastructure. And so,
Right.
so there's still flexibility as far as what the ultimate,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you again, Plan Commission's only advisor to the council, right?
Right.
So the Plan Commission could say, yes, we recommend approval of this preliminary plat that is 59 lots. The council could say, nah, we want, 72 or 80 lots, and we would have to work before we get to the final plat phase of adding those additional lots. Now, could we easily do it? Yes, we have, 2 other plats, preliminary plats that have 85 and 72 lots. So, yeah, it is doable, and it's ultimately up to the council and how much density you do want there.
Thanks.
so that's to be determined. Any other questions?
yeah, I have a question that Alder Schuda brought up. In the packet that we had, there's a memo dated April 2nd, and then the one that we just got for April 8th. Is that in regard to the infrastructure? Because you had the Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Scott's not here.
Is the
One from Scott here.
Oh, from Board of Public Works?
Yeah.
So that one was written last week. This one was written, last week, Friday, and today as well. So
This is written,
So the one from April
So that-
2nd, that's Scott's memo for Board of Public Works.
Right.
Outlining essentially awarding the bid for the 2.8 plus the 15% contingency. And then what you have before you is the numbers that I had put together based on the 2.8.
Right.
Yeah, his
project.
numbers were 3.2.
That includes the 15% contingency,
Right.
correct?
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks for that clarification. Anything else?
I have a comment.
Okay.
Again, I'm all for the infrastructure being laid and get everything ready, because the plat is not ready yet. We're not even in that phase yet. But I think we need to get on board, at least get the sewer and water up there to have it ready for when the final plat is done.
Agreed. Anything else? Public? Hearing none, we'll take a vote. Those,
Sam's got a question.
oh, Sorry, I didn't.
I had questions and a couple comments. So I'd like to say thanks to, again, our director there for reaching out, working with the Summers on this. I spoke to them a little bit too. There's some concerns about that water course and the green space, and I'm glad that we've worked with the people in the community. I'm glad to hear that. I took a trip out there actually, and yeah, the thing runs with quite a bit of water, and I could see the potential that everybody's talking about for the green space, as it were. And I was curious, just as a member of the community, what our parks would be looking at doing with that, because that's not in there, and kind of what this infrastructure that we're talking about putting in there would kind of lock us into, per se, for development of that green space. And that's just kind of a concern that I was hoping to hear a little more about.
I could just address the green space. We're still working through some of those details with the Summers, right? So the Summers want an outlot that's dedicated, sold to them or given to them for their management. And then, the city's either pursuing a public access or public access easement for the Lost Creek, or the city's also looking at retaining that outlot for green space for public purpose, plus the ped path, and then providing the Summers an easement. We're just disagreeing a little bit on how we get to that resolution, whether or not the city owns it or the Summers own it. But I feel relatively confident that we'll be able to find some resolution where the public will have access to Lost Creek. I know Director Kramer's here. He could talk a little bit more about like the future park planning in that area. Most of that park does meet the 10-minute walk to a park campaign, but there's also some conversation about larger community park assets out in this part of the community as well.
Director Kramer.
Yeah, so as Director Karnowski stated, if we can make, if something works for the subdivision planning, we're willing to come to the table, and they've been getting our feedback quite a bit. I think ultimately what we've talked about is there isn't a community park to the east side of the interstate. So long-term planning, as they kind of lay things out in that corridor, not this subdivision, but in the future, we would have interest of serving that side of the city, especially as we grow with a community park. Things that have been talked about in the park system, again, long-term planning, not soon, is, a lot of communities around us have kind of ball fields like four-leaf clovers and larger infrastructure. Again, not suitable for this site, but as we talk about more housing and things out in that location, we've kind of identified some things that could happen to the north of this or in other locations in the future someday. Additionally, we just said if there's opportunity with the Plover River crossing, that's going to kind of connect the green circle to the east side. If the subdivision comes together in whatever way they end up working that out, we've just said that we would be interested in trail infrastructure in this area someday. So we're definitely a willing participant. They've done a great job of looping us in, and as they kind of settle where this lands, we'll plug in to whatever aspect comes into that. As you recall, with the subdivision, there's some fees for parkland or there's land, and we basically kind of go back and forth on what makes the most sense in each area of the city. This one's unique because there's future planning, so it could come now or it could come later. And we're aware of that, so it really comes down to their math and all the infrastructure they're working through. Certainly we want to support their roads and kind of the development because that allows us to function, and we'll plug in if there's an opportunity now or later. We're comfortable with both routes depending upon whichever route they go.
Thank you, Director. Any other questions? Time for us to take a vote. Those in favor of approving the funding for the construction of the proposed infrastructure for the subdivision at 5498 Gala Road would signify, if approval, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And opposed would be no. That passes unanimously. It takes us to approval of claims paid.
I move approval of the claims paid. Hey, it's my last chance.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Alder Morrow. Any unusual ones that you want to bring to our attention, Corey?
Nothing too unusual, so just a couple of capital projects that are on the list. But
The ever-present KB Willett Arena.
Yep.
It's getting there. It's close. All right. All right. So that passes unanimously, and,
Did we?
oh, no,
recall,
we need approval of claims paid. We have
So
a
we've got a
motion
motion.
and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and opposed would be no. That's approved unanimously. We stand adjourned at 7:05.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.